Welcome, everyone. We are back for our next episode of The Next Big Thing. My name is Chris Gannatti, Global Head of Research at Wisdom Tree, and today I am joined by Manuj Aggarwal, the founder of the company Tetra Noodle, very focused on artificial intelligence. So our topic today is really going to be going deep on various aspects of artificial intelligence. But as is always the case, before we begin, I do need to state the following to clarify: the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and Tetra Noodle and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. And with that, Manuj, I'd love to start out by learning a bit alongside our audience here about the origin story. I know every company has an origin story.
Yeah.
We're familiar with some of them for the big companies, but for Tetra Noodle, I have to admit I have read various things on the website, but would love to hear it direct from the source.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what happened was after I moved from India to North America, this was around 1998, and that was the dot-com boom time, and a lot of
And we're in
companies.
North America, just to
I
ground
moved
us.
from. So I grew up in North India, and I moved to Vancouver, Canada, in 1998. So as I said, it was the dot-com boom time. A lot of new internet companies were starting. So I had a good, decent amount of experience in software. I had about a couple of years of experience. So I did not have a lot of difficulty finding a job. So I started off as a junior engineer in an internet company. Interestingly enough, it was a predecessor of Amazon. They were trying to build this, a global marketplace for businesses. Anyway, so I was, involved in this company building the marketplace, but then dot-com bust happened, and the company basically lost all the money, and they sort of shut doors, and I lost the job. And after that, it happened that the job market became really tight. So I got a couple of other jobs in small startups and whatnot, but the same thing happened where the companies did not survive. So what ended up happening was within a span of 3 or 4 years, I lost 4 jobs, and that basically forced me into entrepreneurship. So I said, because I was coming from developing country India, like where job security is not a thing. I realized that no matter where you go, it's generally not guaranteed you're going to have a job. So that's what sort of prompted me to start my consulting company, and I started working with rather than one employer, multiple companies, helping them with their products, building their technology, and that's sort of the origin story. This was back in 2001 when we launched the company.
In thinking about it, you seem to have, software building experience. The word developer comes to mind, but then suddenly you were launching a consulting firm. How challenging was it at that time? Like, were people just basically like, well, he's talking to us about tech, he's a developer, that's fine, even if he doesn't have consulting direct experience? Like, was that a hurdle to convince people to get over, or was it, basically you have the developer experience and that was enough?
Yeah, it was obviously quite challenging, and not to say the least. Like looking for clients, talking to them, convincing them. I had no sales or marketing experience. uh you know didn't even have experience in how to write a contract, accounting, these kind of things that you have to take care of when you start a business or run a business. So everything had to be sort of figured out. The good thing is that my own origin story, like I used to work in a factory in India, and I started working at 15. So I didn't realize it. At, I was picking up a lot of sort of principles of how to develop a business, how to run a business, how to choreograph various steps in a business so that the clients get the result that they are looking for. And even though I did not have a lot of sales and marketing experience, I had developed through my work in India, like ability to just converse with people, talk to people, and build some sort of a relationship and understand what kind of problems and challenges they are facing. So that really came in handy to build a local network and sort of talk to people and see if they had some challenges in technology, if they were looking for some help in software. So just through that, and then through word of mouth, I started getting. I didn't have like a lot of clients, but they were enough to pay the bills and bring in enough income for us to continue to grow.
What was a sort of typical project in the sense that obviously if we're sitting here in 2024,
Yeah,
the general person might have a lot of questions about artificial intelligence. But if we're
yeah,
sitting there in, 2002, 3, 4, 20 years ago, I'm assuming that the typical question that you were dealing with was probably not artificial intelligence. It was
yeah, yeah,
probably something else. And just to give us a baseline, like what
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
people wanting to learn from you at that
Yeah,
time?
yeah. So I remember, one of the first projects that I got that I got to work on was a payment system. So, uh, pa- we this company that I worked with, they had uh, they had internet kiosk back in the day. If you remember, like if you went to a resort or a tourist destination, we didn't have smartphones or anything, but if people wanted to access the internet, there were kiosks that you just put a dollar bill into and you got like 10 minutes of internet time.
It's crazy to think about that today,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yes.
So, obviously back in 2000, around 2002, 2003, that kiosk business was dying down. Like, people were carrying not smartphones in those days, but they had access to the internet through their laptops and whatnot. So what that company wanted to do was convert their technology into a bill payment system where they could use the existing kiosk technology that they developed and then put those kiosks in places like telecom service centers, like for paying their cell phone bills and things of that nature. So we converted that kiosk technology into bill payment, where somebody who walks into a T-Mobile service center, or any other telecom service center, instead of talking to the customer service rep, they could go to this kiosk and pay their bill, right? So a lot of components had to be figured out. How to figure out what their account number was, how much did they owe, and then the final thing was how to accept the payment. So we had to work with the banks, we had to work with the credit card processors, in some cases cash, how to secure it, how to apply that payment to the account. So it was quite a challenging job in putting all of it together. And the biggest thing was security, because we were dealing with cash, we were dealing with people's money. And so earlier on we realized, like that was the one thing I started realizing how important security is in any kind of technology project. Because even today, now more than ever, data has become the new wealth, the new gold. And so even in 2002, 2003, I realized how important it was to secure that data. And so that was one of the first ones. And then we worked on many other projects in education. We worked on school information systems, which help administrators run their schools. We worked with healthcare projects where we helped labs which collected blood samples to test various diseases and then distribute those results to hospital systems, then to doctors, individual doctors. We also worked on, these were early days. So we worked with a startup. They wanted to offshore the transcription of doctors. So in US specifically, when you visit a doctor, the doctor has to take transcribe the description of the visit with the patient, like what happened. And so obviously doctors are so overloaded with work. This was something, this administrative work was taking a lot of their time. So we created a system where they could dictate the visit, and then that dictation gets offloaded to a remote transcriptionist who are trained in specifics of this medical speak, whatever the lingo was, and they were transcribing the whole report and sending it back to the doctor and the hospital system. So these were some of the initial projects that were quite interesting.
Now, in that's actually an interesting example because, roughly 20 years ago, it sounds like, it was a heavily manual process, and the solution was, instead of the doctor doing this or that, you get a few more people involved, and those people are quote unquote familiar enough with the medical lingo so as not to be a complete waste of time. But I remember a couple of years ago, there was a company, Nuance Communications, which was acquired by Microsoft for, I think it was 19.7 billion. We don't hear a lot about it anymore because it was right before the large language model craze. But one of the things they were doing was basically, before there were widespread large language models, they were basically saying, if we have a system that can recognize medical terminology better, and the doctor can either speak normally and have the visit and the system is just transcribing the visit, or it's amazing to just think about all the stuff technically that had to occur over that 20-year period to go from, again, people who are quote unquote familiar with medical lingo and terminology to the system can basically function on its own. It's interesting to just pause and think about that for a second.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's also amazing how short of a period that is. Like 20 years is not a long time if we think about it. Uh, to go from somebody who had to train for years to understand this language to now a machine being able to do that faster and better. On the flip side, there had to be a lot of developments in the middle. Cloud technology needed to be developed. A lot of new algorithms needed to be developed. A lot of new CPU, like compute power, needed to be in place to be able to handle all this data and run all these large algorithms to understand, to make the machine understand what the humans were talking about. And then because I remember even working on systems which were recognizing images and speech and whatnot, there are so many variables. Like we all have different accents. We speak at a different pace. Sometimes there's a background noise. So it's not that easy for a machine to be able to discern each and every complex word or make sense of it. So definitely it's fascinating how fast technology moves, but also it's fascinating how every piece of technology builds upon itself and sort of creates an ecosystem where these powerful systems are possible.
Now, were you watching from possibly from the inside, because I admittedly don't know how you were setting up the systems of Tetra Noodle, but if you look at, say, the history of Amazon, it was sort of in 2004, 5, 6, at least within Amazon, maybe not publicized widely yet. The beginnings of Amazon Web Services were kind of coming together, and that was one of the sort of first movers in the public cloud space. I'm just curious, what was it that, because we probably a lot of us wouldn't even remember like how you would set up a system before the cloud, and then you're probably in the seat running the company, transitioning through the cloud, possibly helping people, other companies transition to the cloud, or explain what might the benefits be. Why should we even look at that? I know on this podcast we have talked to cloud computing firms. We've talked about cloud computing, but we've never spoken to somebody who was, hands on the keyboard during the time sort of before the world awakened to the cloud and started transitioning into the cloud. And then you get to where we are in 2024, where people are now thinking in this sort of hybridized fashion where they're trying to optimize and say, okay, this stuff should be on premises and this stuff should be in the cloud. And because the data can move so quickly, it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of interesting things happen as you go through technology cycles or transitions, which we are going through right now as well, like as AI is taking over. So, back before the public cloud, let's say if you want to set up some sort of a system, first you had to call Dell or IBM or one of these hardware vendors and say, okay, we are going to place an order for 3 servers, and it used to cost like $50,000 to $100,000 just to get a decent computer, a rack, and like all the physical infrastructure, the components of that, to even before thinking about, okay, what are we going to do as a company. So there was a huge capital investment that was needed up front. So I'm just talking about a small startup with with a couple of servers. But if you were thinking of doing something significant, the infrastructure cost used to be in millions. Anyway, once you get those servers delivered, then you had to physically put them in the racks, put the cables in, make sure there is enough power, all of that stuff. Make sure there's air conditioning to cool down the servers. You had to make sure all of these things are in place, and then you start to actually put the software on. So you had to configure the operating system, you had to put your custom software, whatever that is, and then you had to make sure that the software was updated, the operating system was updated, because if there was a security patch released by Microsoft, you had to make sure it was installed, otherwise your system is vulnerable. All of these things were over and above of taking care of your business, your company, however you serve the clients, right? So the very first project where we actually started to implement cloud was around in 2006. Now, mind you, before we moved on to the public cloud, we started experimenting with virtualization. So we said, okay, we like this was a company, Pearson Education, and this was a rather large client. So they had a server, they had a data center. So Pearson is a public company, and so they had many divisions. So what they did was they created their own private data center with hundreds and hundreds of servers, and started providing shared services to each one of their departments or their divisions. So what we said was, okay, we have hundreds of these servers, not all of them are being utilized to their full capacity. So virtualization was a mature technology by then. So we started virtualizing these servers, and instead of using 10 physical servers, we said, okay, we'll use the capacity of 3 physical servers, but then divide them into like 10 virtual servers. So we started experimenting with that. We got good results, and then that sort of led us to say, okay, now we have proven out that virtual servers are good. They save costs in our private data center. So now how can we leverage the public cloud and not spend as much in hardware costs and maintenance and upgrades and whatnot, and start moving slowly towards public cloud. Now, since my background has been primarily working with enterprise clients and startups who engage with enterprise clients, we actually started by hybrid approach, where some software was in our private data center, some of that was in public cloud. and we started creating these secure tunnels between the private and public and sharing data across. But now these days, whenever we work with clients, generally most of the stuff is done in the private cloud. Only I will say like 5 to 10% of the infrastructure is on private premises.
It's interesting, and I just want to make sure I have this right, because without the direct development background, when we think of virtualization, it's something where you're basically able to divide up to a certain degree the capacity of a given sort of physical system, because there is always a physical system sort of in the background. At Wisdom Tree, we talk a lot about virtualization and using different machines. It's kind of a nifty way to recognize every task that you do has sort of a different sort of ideal level of computational demand.
Yeah, yeah,
And if I'm looking at the attribution of every index at Wisdom Tree, the demand might be way up here. And if I'm just opening up a spreadsheet for myself, the demand might be way down here.
yeah,
And that's changing all the time. But if you're dividing these physical systems in this way, which is not always how it was done, but it sounds like late 90s, 2000s, it was starting to be done. You're basically recognizing, similar to how we talk about cars today, in the sense that a lot of people buy a car and then for 98% of its life, it's sitting in a garage or a parking lot.
correct, correct.
And it's not now, if the cars were to drive themselves, we could divide up amongst different users, and maybe the owner is getting paid and all of that, but obviously we're not quite there today. But it is interesting to sort of hear that this, and like you said, it's building on what came before, and then cloud computing sort of comes a bit after, and it's sort of like an amplified way to exponentially increase the accessibility, from what it sounds like, of this virtualization
Exactly,
concept.
exactly.
I've
Yeah,
never heard it explained quite like that, so I'm glad, Manuj, we went through that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, public cloud is basically a large virtualization implementation. So because virtualization started happening around 2001, 2002, so it started to come like it started to. I remember the very first product that I heard about virtualization was around that time frame, 2001, 2002. So as that technology developed and matured, companies like Microsoft and Amazon realized that we could deploy this virtualization at a very large scale and sell that virtual server as a service. So that, I mean, public cloud is basically an implementation of virtualization, right?
What is it when you say it's interesting to think back to that period of time, just to again ground us in appreciation of what we have today, because in today's world, if you say, I heard about this, I heard about that, we have Twitter or X, depending on what you want to call it. We have LinkedIn. We have just the general internet. We have podcasts. We have smartphones. We have the Facebook, Instagram, you name it. We have it. But in 2002, 3, 4, when you say, I heard about, like where was it that you would have heard? Because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
seems like, if we're honest, you have to put some effort in
yeah,
to quote
yeah.
unquote hear
That's a
about
very
things
interesting.
at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, today we are drowning in information. Back then information was not as accessible, right? So I remember even like in 2001, 2002, like if I had to really deeply study a topic, like I had to either go to a library, buy a book, and the books used to cost like $50 per book, right? Like
Hmm.
50
Hmm.
at least. So it was a huge investment to just get this information. And when I say I heard about it, like I used to subscribe to RSS feeds of news, newsletters, online newsletters. I used to go to like these websites dedicated, communities dedicated to like developer communities. So we still have those today. I mean, they have been replaced with Discord communities. They have been replaced with Facebook groups and whatnot. Humans always have found a way to coalesce. When we have common interests, when we share, when we are like-minded, when we want to talk about certain things, this is nothing new. Like even when we were evolving from the caveman days, right? We found ways to sort of build our own local communities and exchange those ideas. The medium through which we do that keeps changing as the technology keeps changing. So back then it used to be like a lot of news servers. I don't know if some people may not even know there's a whole new internet called the news servers. Okay, so you subscribe to these news servers where people are sharing almost like in an email format their ideas, and it gets distributed to the entire uh, uh, subscription base of that news server. So there are multiple groups, and it exists today as well. Like there are a lot of people still active on that. But now with modern equipment, smartphones and things of that nature, they're not very accessible. They're not very handy. So then, as humans are nature of, we like convenience, we like ease of use. So whatever platform makes it easier for us to like communicate with like-minded people, we tend to migrate off that, right? So I remember one of the most frequently websites I used to visit was MSDN, Microsoft Developer Network, and that's where a lot of the new products that Microsoft. So I generally used to build with Microsoft products, so that's where I used to get a lot of my information from. But now, yeah, I mean now it's a whole new world. There's too much information, and sometimes it takes days or weeks before the news reaches you. But that's why companies like Google and others are so valuable now, because they are in the business of synthesizing that information.
I'm curious, Manuj, because in following the industry, hearing okay, in that period of time, early 2000s, you're logging in or reading off of a sort of Microsoft run site. Microsoft was, some would probably say, a different company than it is today at that time. And I would just be intrigued to hear from your, entrepreneur developers type perspective, what you think of how Microsoft has evolved, and if you were, continuing the journey and continuing to build on those tools, or if there was a period where you're like, look, I'm fed up, and a certain, because over along the way, Python comes out, all these different things sort of come out, and maybe they take away the need, like in 2003 4 or so, maybe you need to go through the Microsoft gateway, but in 2024 you might have just freely available open source software, and it feeds into a discussion obviously we're having today with AI, where there's going to be open source AI and there's going to be platform oriented AI, and maybe the journey that you saw Microsoft take has something we can learn about the
Yeah, yeah.
journey that AI might take.
Absolutely. I think, not just Microsoft, I think the entire software industry, tech industry went through a transition through that phase, because before around 2004, 2005, everything was proprietary generally. Linux, I think, came out in late 1990s. That was the major, one of the only, if I can recall, one of the only major sort of platforms that was open source, even though there was a lot of talk about open source versus proprietary, and there was very passionate heated discussions between people. Hey, if everything is open source, how are people going to make money? Like, this is ridiculous. And open source community said, hey, this is a public service, and we should not really close source anything. So I saw a transition happening in the industry where everything used to be closed source proprietary, and then slowly open source communities started to emerge to build the tools and the platforms, and then create economic and commercial opportunities for people to build upon those open source platforms. Like, so what you just said, now there are open source frameworks even for AI. Facebook, a company like Facebook, which is obviously for profit, they have released their AI platform to the world to build upon that, right? So that mindset shift, that shift in the world of software, that hey, even if we release this software, in an open source way, we can still create commercial opportunities for not only us to make money, but other people who use this software to make money. And that's a good thing for everyone concerned. Second thing that happened was that that we started realizing that there is no one sort of solution to the problem. We can mix and match. So I can work with Amazon software, with Facebook software, with Microsoft software, and we can put all of it together to solve a complex problem. We don't have to just stick with one stack or one even programming language and whatnot. So this idea that let's focus on the real world problems, business problems, and not be too passionate about what technology do we use, how it all glues together and works together, which platform do we use. These kind of things became less important. So these days now, you know uh, I hear less of it. I mean, there are still a lot of people passionate about one platform or the other, but also as you gain experience in the field, you realize you know technology is nothing else but a tool to solve business problems. Technology for the sake of technology is meaningless unless it actually solves a business problem. So how we solve it uh, is more important, and the tools that we use are less important as long as they serve the purpose for everyone in the ecosystem, right?
It's clear that if you listen to Jensen Huang speak at the various NVIDIA conferences, whether it was Computex recently or GTC, um, we're sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, they have this chip and it costs 40,000 or maybe 50,000 on the secondary market. So it's funny you mentioned, back in the day the whole server was 50,000. Now just
Yeah, yeah,
the chip is 50,000,
yeah.
and you need a lot of them apparently. So you're sitting back looking at the price of these things, but most of the talk, if you listen to NVIDIA's leadership give the talk, has nothing to do with just saying how great the chip is. They're saying you create, I think they call it the omniverse, where they basically create this sort of virtualized system where you can have a digital twin of almost anything up to the size of planet Earth, and you're using that, which the chip is obviously a big part of it, to process more data than probably has ever been processed before in a unit of time that is shorter than has ever been the case before. And maybe you simulate the weather, or maybe you simulate the next race car, or maybe you simulate a possible cure for cancer or a certain disease therapy, whatever each case might be. And the degree of complexity that you're able to deal with is exponentially increasing in relevant time scales. Because obviously, back years and years ago, you could still have processed the data, but it would have taken 6 or 8 months to do maybe one run. And today's world, what would have taken 6 or 8 months before might take 5 minutes or possibly even less. And so you're seeing that sort of exponential increase. But the focus, and I think this is the most important question today. It's not NVIDIA's next chip. It's what is it that we collectively are using the hundreds of billions with a B, that all the hyperscalers are spending on NVIDIA chips and other chips to build out this massive computational infrastructure that should be used in a useful manner for the world. But the key question, as yet unanswered, is what is that useful manner? What is that use case where we need, over these next couple of years, hundreds of billions to be invested to then recognize a return on that investment? And I'm personally very interested to see how the story continues to evolve. Manuj, I'd love if you had a view of what you think all this computational infrastructure is going to ultimately be used for.
You know, it's very interesting. Like, this is very similar question that we had when the internet came around, right? Like, if you remember the first few websites, even larger websites like Yahoo.com and whatnot, they were just a bunch of text links, and not much was happening on those websites. But still, people saw, oh, there is something here. Like, this is worth something. and how it is going to transform the world, we don't know yet. But every step of the way, as I explained earlier, like every step of the way, technology improves a little bit. So I think we are at the same threshold again, where we are putting together all this infrastructure, and we understand, hey, this chip, all the data that we are producing, all the algorithms that we have, they are going to solve some big problems. Now, most of the people don't realize we are going through a huge transition from the human intellect solving the problem to machine intellect solving the problem. These are totally different realms. And then you put on top of it the, the imminent uh, arrival of quantum computing, which is a totally different aspect to even wrap your head around, because we humans tend to think in black and white. It is either true or false. But the when you learn about quantum physics, when you learn about how the universe operates, it's just a random uh, a random set of possibilities. Like, it could be false, it could be true, it could be something in the middle. And then quantum computing actually is able to understand that weird sense of what is in the middle. So when you add all these technologies together, how it will unfold, we are still, as humanity, trying to figure out how how we can use these technologies to solve what kind of problems. The immediate ones you already named, right? Like, find cure for these major diseases, find a solution for climate change, find ways on how we can solve hunger, food. But I think as things unfold, I think we are going to see a shift in how society is set up itself, like the capitalist society, how it is set up. Right now, the capitalist society is sort of like a pyramid scheme, where the people at the top is sort of creating all the opportunities, and people at the bottom are getting uh, to enjoy employment and whatnot, right? But if you see, a shift is already happening, where gig economy and individuals taking control of their own lives is becoming the norm now, right? So why is this happening? Because technology enables us to do that. It's still the same capitalist society, but now we are not relying too much on top down approach. People are able to take control of their lives even at the bottom, without relying on a somebody giving them a job. Like, take Uber, for example, right? Globally, it used to take a lot of time and effort and resources to even get a license to operate a taxi in a decent city. But now, it takes is a smartphone and a car, and off you go. Even for the car, you can get a decent financing. So, and you see this happening in multiple industries across the globe. So as I said, as technology takes over, not only we will find solutions to these large problems, but I think the capitalist society itself will be inverted in some ways, where a lot of people will start becoming entrepreneurs, start taking small little local problems that they see in their vicinity, and solving them and building businesses using technology. So obviously, nobody can tell the future, but I see the patterns of that developing now.
And Manoj, it's interesting to be able to speak to somebody in your position, because you've benefited from, I guess, in the technology world, roughly 20 years, give or take, is a long time. But I mean, we were talking about the universe a second ago. There, that's a tiny blip, but you step back and you recognize you've been in a position to see the world shift gears towards cloud computing, which feels like in the beginning of that shift, it was probably very slow, and businesses were kind of asking one kind of question and maybe looking for excuses not to do it. And then at a certain point, it flips over and it becomes much faster. If you're thinking about your typical interaction today about artificial intelligence, what signals are you seeing? Because when we're about to go through the next few weeks, we're going to hear the earnings of all these different software companies that are all trying to say that they're doing all these things in AI. And it's very difficult for investors to be in a position to recognize how should we be thinking about the pace, because we're probably too excited and then we get too pessimistic, and AI just continues at the rate that it was going to continue anyway, and companies continue to do their due diligence and research. But it's very difficult if you're not, a CTO, a purchasing manager for software. It's very difficult to gauge, is it happening at the quote unquote right speed, or what is that speed, so that you then use it to build an appropriate baseline expectation for a given, say, investment that might have exposure to software. So I'm just curious on your thoughts in terms of the general company that you're speaking to, their speed of adoption of these different types of AI.
We are very early in the cycle, in my opinion. If I were to say what is the equivalent, I think we are like, so as I said, like, very first time I logged into the internet was around 1995. And in 1998, as I said, like, I was applying for my first entry level job. And if I didn't have an email address, and I did not have a Word resume, I could not even apply for a entry level job. In 3 years, the world had changed. I think we are somewhere in the middle of that, like 1996, around that time frame, where people realize, okay, AI is going to impact my business, but how it will impact it, I don't know. So as there are few people on this planet who understand technology, business, and various aspects of how this is all put together, people are hesitant to actually invest in that. Now, I interact a lot with various industry leaders, including, CTOs of Fortune 500 companies. And what we are seeing now is the boards of most of these companies are very are run by people who were brought up in the pre-internet age. Okay, they don't have a lot of knowledge about how technology is impacting the world and how technology is going to impact their business. So they are very hesitant in actually doing anything, because it's a black box for them. It's an unknown thing. So what I feel like is going to happen is, the companies who are more nimble, the companies who are run by people who grew up in the internet age, who are a little bit more tech savvy, they are going to race ahead. They are going to find the right use cases to implement AI, because AI is, don't get me wrong, this is one of the most powerful technologies ever invented by human beings. Because prior to AI, everything that was invented was to enhance our physical abilities, right? So a crane can lift a heavier weight than a human can. A car can go faster than a human can run. But never before was a machine invented that could think faster and more accurately than a human. You could say a computer was, a calculator was, but it was very limited in scope. But AI has the knowledge of the sum total of human thought, historical sum total of human thought. So if applied correctly, it has the power to 100x somebody's an organization's potential, right? Like, we could deploy a sales and marketing AI agent in a company and quadruple their sales pipeline overnight, right? So
A strong statement.
no, it is a proven statement, and I stand by that, because it is so powerful in doing what it does. Now, your immediate reaction was strong statement, right? Now,
Yeah.
imagine a board of directors making a decision on this, where, they are running $1 billion company. Most likely, they'll just say, "Oh, this is too good to be true. I'm not going to even touch this," and they're going to back off. Now, there's going to be a smaller company, a more nimble company, that they say, "Oh, this is entirely possible. Let's do it," and they are going to race forward, and leave this other company behind, right? And that is exactly what happened when the internet started coming up, because a traditional bank who did not adopt technology was overtaken by a bank that started offering online payments,
Mhm.
online account management. Netflix took over Blockbuster. Apple iPhone took over Kodak, a company for photography.
BlackBerry, you're up there in
Yeah,
Canada.
exactly. So the idea is that uh, it is not about the technology. Technology is proven; it is there. It is about the human mindset. Who is more nimble? Who can actually implement this technology? Who has the knowledge that blends the technology plus business and the world around us? Those are the companies which will benefit tremendously, and people who stay mm, uh, cautious and they say, oh, we'll wait and watch and see what happens. Unfortunately, they are going to take a long time and will have to play a huge catch up to the companies that race forward.
I'd be interested to hear, Manuj, in the 2024 environment, let's say hypothetically you're working with a new engagement, a new client, they're coming to you, they want to use AI. You're seeing it in every headline. You're seeing the importance of cybersecurity and all these things in every headline as you go through your various days. Do they tend to come to you when they get to that phase knowing, here's what I do, here's what I hope AI can do, can you make it just do this? Or is it more of an open-ended engagement where you're basically learning what are their main priorities, how does their business work, and after you learn more about them, with your experience with AI, you're able to maybe marry it a bit better. So maybe they're coming in saying it can help me write emails, or
Yeah,
it
yeah,
can help me schedule travel, or the common things that get cited,
yeah,
which are not insignificant, but at the same time, like you're saying, with a bit more knowledge of the tools, you can probably get the tools to do a whole lot more
yeah.
different things than what you would even imagine.
Yeah, this is a very good, interesting question. You see, generally people come to us with smaller problems. They'll say, hey, can you help me write this email? Exactly what you just said, right? I'll give you an example. Like, one of major telecom companies. So or any other industry you can imagine, like from various industries we get clients and they say exactly the same thing. Hey, can you help us find this information better because our data is all scattered? Can you help us communicate better on time, follow up with our clients because we tend to forget. So they are still on the very surface of their day-to-day problem. But then we say, okay, we can help you. Let's come to the table. Let's see what the real issue seems to be. And then it is our job to say, okay, let's dive a little bit deeper and see, okay, where is the root cause of the problem? Because when you go to a doctor, you can say, hey, doctor, like I have a headache, I have this migraines, and it really bothers me. And if the doctor is an experienced doctor, they can say, okay, let's get some tests done and MRIs done. An inexperienced doctor can say, okay, here is an Advil and go, and everything will be fine. But if an experienced doctor finds out, hey, there is actually a tumor in your brain and needs to be operated like right now, otherwise you're gonna be you're gonna suffer a lot of pain. So that's sort of the role that we adopt, where we look in their business and say, okay, what are the processes that are happening which is creating this symptom of inefficiency and productivity loss in your business? And what we generally discover is that the root cause is much, 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 much deeper. Is because they don't even have a sense of how to apply technology. They are still running multi-billion-dollar businesses on spreadsheets. They are still not very familiar with what predictive analytics can do. Where technology can take care of problems even before they actually happen. Before they can schedule their employees visits to sites in an optimized way where it's not like just randomly distributed, and save hundreds or thousands of hours. They can raise customer loyalty by really understanding the profile of each customer and providing them a personalized service. All these things are possible today. And since most people do not even understand the basics of technology, they make do with what they are good at, which is spreadsheets and sending emails and whatnot. And once we uncover this tumor, then we show them that, hey, look, this is the tumor, and if you don't fix it, this is what's going to happen in 2 years. And this goes back to our conversation earlier. Why some of these companies will be more competitive than others. The companies who find the tumor and find the fix for that today will be more competitive than others. So it starts with a very generic small problem, but when we dig deeper, we find bigger problems. And that's when we give a choice or a roadmap to fix those problems, because we cannot fix everything overnight. We cannot boil the ocean. So we say, okay, let's fix part of this root cause problem and then start to build upon that, so that come 2025 2026, you will be a digital first, AI first company, which is totally taking advantage of all the capabilities available today, and you will be competitive for the next decades, or couple of decades.
And you've how long, Manuj, have you been doing what many people would refer to today, kind of a distributed workforce model, which is much more normal post-COVID? Wisdom Tree has a lot of people that work across various different countries. Just as one example, I know we're not the only firm to do that, but it years ago, trying to say, okay, I've got a certain percentage of my workforce in India, and I've got a certain percentage here and a certain percentage here, that was far less of a normal thing. And partly one of the things that was invented is Zoom, or all the various platforms that are basically similar to Zoom, that allow us to look at each other on the screen and take in some sort of emotional feedback and what have you, as close to being in person as possible. Maybe we'll be doing this in virtual reality in a few years, who knows? But how long and how interesting or successful or challenging has the distributed model been that you hear about more and more these days?
So I recall the first distributed model I was involved in, was back in 2000, I think around year 2000, 2001. And honestly, I've never had since 2001, I've never had an opportunity where everyone was in one location. Never. I've been been working from my home office for the last at least, if I can recall, at least 15, 16 years. Only few years I was on customer sites or visiting in a office building and everything. Everything else has been super remote. So during COVID time, it was a lot of people found it like a new way of working. But I think in the tech sector, it's a norm. That's how people work.
And I'd be remiss, as we I've got my eye on the clock here, so we do have to wind down. But I felt like the last thing I wanted to be able to cover is, when we've spoken in the past, you've mentioned former President Barack Obama, you've mentioned Bill Gates, either commenting or having some familiarity with some things that you've either touched or been involved with in the past. I would love to sort of leave the audience with these intriguing stories, because many of us may never do something that Bill Gates or a former president are even aware of, and you've already ticked that box, which is pretty cool. And not every guest on our show has done anything on that scale.
No, it was a pleasant surprise for sure, and honor. So we built a system to help students stay in their degree programs rather than drop out. So it's as many of you may be familiar, it's a huge problem in higher education institutions around the world, but especially in the US, because higher education is very, very expensive. And 30% of the students drop out of their degree programs within their first 2 years. And the reason is because when they enroll into these programs, they don't exactly know what they like or what will interest them. So they go with the recommendations of career counselors, and no knock on career counselors. I mean, they try to do their best, but every human being, especially at that age, we don't know the world, we don't know what we are interested in, so we go with the flow, and we rely on the recommendations of our parents, our friends, and career counselors and whatnot. But we end up like getting disillusioned. Like sometimes we find the topics we pick are not interesting, or they are too difficult, and then we have student debt pressurizing us. So 30% of the students just drop out, right? So that's a loss for the university, that's a loss for the student, that's a loss for society. And so what we did was use simple AI algorithms. We collected data for hundreds of thousands of students, their SAT scores, their school transcripts, and things of that nature. And we created a model recommendation system to see which students will do good in which type of courses. And as they are enrolling into their degree program, we use these models to make the right recommendations. Very much similar to like Netflix recommends shows to us, or Amazon recommends products to us. So the result was that every student that went through that program, they ended up actually taking 20% more courses to finish their degree program rather than drop out. So that was the impact project, and ultimately Bill Gates and his foundation invested in the project, and President Obama mentioned it as well. So that, obviously we didn't know it was going to have that kind of impact when we were building it, but it ended up being a very satisfying experience.
Very, very, very cool indeed. Now, if any of our listeners, Manuj, want to sort of continue to follow you, continue to follow Tetra Noodle, what would you recommend for them in terms of just making sure they have that option to stay in contact with you as we move forward now through the AI journey?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can visit our company website, tetranoodle.com, or you can visit my personal website, manujaggarwal.com, or, the easiest thing is just maybe connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know you heard me on this podcast, and what are you trying to do with technology? What are you trying to do with AI, and how can we help?
Excellent. Well, Manuj, I want to thank you. It's been a true pleasure. I'm glad we got to meet back in June, and I'm glad we got to do this. It's only been 1 month since meeting, and we've already hit the recording studio. So very, very, very nice indeed. And I want to thank all of our listeners here at The Next Big Thing. Like I've said all along, we keep trying to bring a diversified array of very interesting and impactful guests. Manuj was excellent, and we were able to cover some AI history and some technology history, which was excellent. And I'll look forward to seeing you all and bringing you all that next content, that next episode in the future. Take care, and do not hesitate to stay in touch with all of us here at WisdomTree. Take care.